so much, Vinay, for accepting our invitation to share your thoughts with us on this forum. Recently, Vinay has written on FIFA. When it comes to scoring goals against well known opposition, inspiration simply has to be imported from everywhere. And it applies to Vinay as well. As he is an engineer and MBA in education, spent more than a decade in advertising with well known agencies, part of several award winning efforts at Ad Club and 3 Years of I, backed a prestigious international award, a trainer of creative thinking, a writer with 5 plus books, a blogger, a football player. Basically, he decodes any situation, whether it's a film, song, situation, and he writes daily on Instagram. Over to Vinay for cracking the idea code to succeed.
A very warm hi, good afternoon to everybody who has tuned in. Firstly, let me thank Minds for this invitation. And I like the name Open Minds because that's what we must keep in order to make the most progress in life. The more open your mind is to newer ideas, newer concepts, newer people, I think the further your life story goes. I know Sanjay from a long time. We have played football together. We were part of the winning team, and that's always a special feeling. Um, and when he reached out to me, I was quite excited to uh, talk at the Open Minds Forum. Uh, my work has spanned many different genres of thinking, but what I'm particularly good at is getting people to look at their own thought process differently, and that using a mixture of both storytelling and humor, both of which I think are fundamental pillars to us thinking better in life. And this just does not hold good for your professional life, it holds good for your personal life as well. There's a beautiful thing Edward de Bono had said, which is the quality of your life is directly proportional to the quality of your thinking, right? The better your thought process is, the greater your ability to find your way around problems or to rise up to challenges, the more fertile, the richer your life gets. So that's a little bit of a brief precursor to what follows. What I have is a free flowing presentation that's more in terms of leaving some important ideas in your mind. Uh, Hopefully, they will trigger your thinking in different directions. I also have an interesting code which I will share with you today, which will help you approach your own thinking in a different manner, no matter what domain you come from, right? So without much ado, let's just get down to it. Let me share my screen and I'll just ask whether you're able to see it once so that we are all on the same page. Okay. Can you see this? Can you see the screen?
It's starting. It's starting.
Started?
Yeah, it started now. Yes.
Brilliant. Okay. So I'm just doing it in slideshow. Yeah. Okay. Is that a blank screen for everybody?
Yes.
Okay. It's also a great metaphor. I want you to begin this session with a blank slate in mind, a blank, an open canvas for me to write some interesting new thoughts on. So, what is interesting is that the 21st century was anyways called the century for innovation or creativity. This was innovation or the creativity era. So humanity has had different eras as civilization has progressed. We have had the agricultural or the agrarian era. After that, we had the era of machines. After that, and I'm skipping a few eras here, the last century was what was called the knowledge era. And it was all about who knew what. Knowledge was the most precious resource. But now, because of the digital revolution, knowledge has kind of got equalized. And it's not about how much you know, It's what you do with that information. It's the different combinations you're able to create around the data, right? So that has taken precedence. In a way, synthesis or creativity has come more to the fore. And this was anyway the trend when the 21st century began. But interestingly, the last 3 years have pushed the forward button on this entire process. So if you remember, about 10 years ago, there was this movie which came, which was The Dark Knight Rises. And there was a very interesting villainous character there called Bane. And the thing about Bane was he needed a mask to breathe, right? And that time when we saw it, we said, oh, wow, that's interesting. But mask पहन के कौन breathe करता है? I mean, most of us who are not in Delhi were not so used to it. But in Mumbai and Pune, definitely we don't really use a mask on a daily basis. And lo and behold, 3 years ago, thing happened which changed the entire dynamic. This is me auditioning as Bane, but masks literally became the bane of our existence. Okay, from not at all knowing that concept, we suddenly found our lives had dramatically changed. We suddenly found we woke up to new realities. I never thought living in Mumbai I'd ever see at 11 o'clock in the morning everything is shut down. And yet there was a period like that which was frightening to say the least, to see a city, a bustling metropolis like Mumbai or Pune completely shut down during the pandemic. So we were not allowed to meet each other. The economy, needless to say, really spiraled. Okay, nobody knew when it would recover, if it would recover. We were fighting with uncertainty, right? And yet there is something wonderful about the human thought process, because jitne bhi problem aate hain, we have the capability of finding an idea around that. So we could not find people, could not conduct work. So what happened? Suddenly the Zoom era was born, right? We suddenly started meeting people online. And to a large extent, it has come to stay. So the pandemic kind of triggered that innovation into our lives. And it triggered many other. For instance, electronic payment methods picked up tremendously. Electronic education brands, e-learning brands really took off in this period. We found a different way of doing the same thing, even if it was necessitated upon us, right? And curiously, Indian mythology actually has a little tale which tells us what you should do whenever you are faced with, so to speak, oppressive conditions or conditions where you can't really, conditions which seem impossible to surmount. And that's the story of, yes, let me warn you, I am an incessant punner. So you will find a lot of puns on a lot of these slides. So bear with me. It's something I do to keep myself engaged as well while making presentations. So there is this demon king called Hiranyakashipu. And Hiranyakashipu has got these impossible to beat boons. He cannot be beaten by a man or an animal. He cannot be beaten in the sky or on the ground. He cannot be beaten inside his house or outside his house. He cannot be beaten in the day or in the night. Pretty impossible to beat boons. But then what does Lord Vishnu do? He finds a way around all those conditions. He takes on the avatar of Narasimha. It's an innovation, Narasimha, which is neither fully a man nor fully an animal, half man, half animal. He puts him on his lap and he kills him, neither in the sky nor on the ground. He kills him on the threshold of his house, neither inside nor outside. He kills him in twilight, neither day nor night. So in many ways, whenever it comes to uncertainty, I think there's a divine precedent set here. And I think the lesson is we need to innovate to defeat these modern day demons. We have uncertainty all around us, and the pandemic was just one heightened moment of uncertainty, right? But in our daily lives, in our daily business challenges, we face uncertainty all the time. And what we need to understand is we need to definitely keep on innovating. In fact, for me, there is a lot of, so welcome to cracking the idea code to succeed. That is what I'm going to be talking to you about. And this is, I consider it a dialogue on creative thinking in a post-pandemic world, especially in the post-pandemic world, because I think this has become increasingly more important, right? We keep hearing this word new normal, new normal. And sometimes, as somebody who's trained as an engineer, I find it irritating because it in no way understands the concept of geometry. But plainly put, the new normal post pandemic is you just have to be more creative. You just have to come up with more ideas. You just have to be more flexible around your problems and more expansive and imaginative in your thinking, right? So the new normal is more creativity. So the first question which you should ask yourself, and I'm a big fan of asking questions, is what is creativity? You know, and the problem with the understanding of this term, especially in our country, is that we often, not all the time, but often and most frequently associate creativity with art or sculpture or film production and or writing and things like that. Creativity is, yes, sure, it spans all of that, but it is merely put a different way of looking at a problem which goes across everything, every facet of human existence. Let me repeat and rephrase that. Creativity is something which goes across every facet of human existence. And you will see with some of the stories I'll show you, you have seen it all around you. You just haven't recognized it as such. You just haven't recognized it as an innovative idea, right? So if I were to sculpt a better understanding of creativity, the first thing I would say is use imagination instead of routine thinking, right? Routine thinking is the way we have done things always. It is us working in the autopilot mode. Imagination allows us to dream up possibility which is not in existence right now, and it allows us to look at a different way at the same problem, right? Creativity also could be defined as the process of generating new ideas which have value. Both these terms are very important. New ideas. So it's an idea which did not exist before. Have value is also important because it solves a problem which is there in the world. And that's where creativity is at its finest. An idea which I particularly like is the defeat of habit by originality. Creativity is nothing but the defeat of habit by originality. So you were doing things a certain way, and then suddenly somebody had an idea, and the way you did those things completely changed. And a common example is how we used to shop. We used to literally go to the store or to the market more often, right? But now, since e-commerce has started, we can do shopping sitting at home. It's an original idea which in many ways changed a habit. One line I particularly like, and particularly inspirational when it comes to understanding creativity is the coming together of two unrelated planes of thought. And this is a beautiful thought shared by Arthur Koestler. Creativity is the coming together of two unrelated planes of thought, right? Which means you put two different things together और उनके मिश्रण से और through their synergy or through their mashup, what emerges often is more creative. Let me give you one example, which is a Pune based example actually. There is this interesting shop called Shauki Sweets, and it has created something called a pan dispenser. Such an interesting idea. He's combined a modern day idea like a dispenser, which you usually associate with things like colas and chocolates and whatnot. And he's taken an age-old Indian delicacy called a pan. So it's a coming together not just of Western technology and Eastern culture. It's also two time frames coming together. It's a lot of things coming together. It's a wonderful idea of what is called juxtaposition or matchup, coming together of two different things. Now, the thing about creativity na, is it's a bit like swimming. I can tell you a lot of things, but unless you really experience it for yourself, you will not really go places. You will not understand and internalize the concept at a deeper level. So let's just do a 2-minute exercise at this point. Okay. All of you pick up something which you might be holding close to you within the room. Just pick up one object and bring it to yourself. Just go pick up one object and hold it up. Yeah, somebody's held up a phone. Yes, pick up something, show it to me. Yeah, pen, very nice. Okay. Now for the next 2 minutes, I want you to do this. And you can put in your responses in the chat window below. I want you to say, I am so and I am like this pen, for instance, because I am so and I am like this cell phone because. And the idea is one answer is quite easy. Try and go for more than one answer. And it doesn't have to be logically coherent. You are talking about yourself. You are free to say what you want. I just want you to attempt this exercise, right? For instance, if I had picked up a cactus plant, just for argument's sake, I would say, hi, I'm Vinay Kanchan and I'm like this cactus plant because I'm always green with ideas. Or I'm like this cactus plant because the last position I held in the corporate world was branch manager. Or I'm this cactus plant because I'm a little bit of disturbance. Yeah. I'm a very thorny guy to get onto the other side of. Or I'm like this cactus plant because I'm an eternal optimist. Because a cactus plant grows in the desert. So what you're doing is you're looking at the essence, the qualities of that object and mapping it on to yourself in a very quick fashion. Quick, ad hoc, all of that is fine. Take 3 minutes. Your timer starts now. Drop your responses in the chat box. Nice. I like the answers which are coming. I am Turab and I like this pen because it helps me save my thoughts on an electronic surface for posterity. That's nice. I'm Matchbox. I'm like Sanjay. I'm like a fire who ignites good things. Nice. You're a fire starter. I am Badrish and I like my phone because it makes me do many simple things in less time without extra accessories. Nice. So you're self-contained. I am Sahil and I'm like a book because I hold a lot of information. That's also nice. You're a knowledge seeker. Lakshmikant, I'm like this principle. I can erase the old thought. Nice. Old thought to erase करके नया thought. I am Sahil and I'm like a book because you can't judge me by my awareness. Cover. I'm Venkatesh and I'm like the smart watch which keeps track of my fitness. I'm guessing you're a fitness guy, Venkatesh. That's good. Okay, very nice. So there's a reason. Uh, can you hear me, everybody?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. Keep adding. This is in a way a never-ending exercise because uh, you will keep getting answers as you keep thinking deeper, and you should try and go for more answers. And actually, after we finish this session, the question you should have thought yourself is, if there was an object which completely defines me, what would that object be and why? So you can take it in a more expansive way, the same question. If there is an object which defines me, what would that object be and why? Right? It shows an understanding that you have of yourself. There are two reasons I do this. One is because when people introduce themselves, they usually are quite boring. As in, they'll say, I'm so and so, and I hold this designation usually. Right? That's the most common way people introduce themselves. I think if you want to be more creative, the first thing you have to start being more creative about is yourself, right? You need to look at the man in the mirror, as Michael Jackson said. You need to look at the man in the mirror with fresh eyes. You need to see him or her differently. If you begin to see yourself, you're your own biggest blind spot in life, right? You are your own biggest blind spot. It's only when you begin to see yourself differently that you begin to get more creative, right? I am Alpana and I'm like a book because the more you read, the more knowledge you gain. That's also nice. We'll come back to this. Let me just go a little ahead. Okay, I hope you all found that useful. It is an interestingly childish exercise, and I think one of the key learnings, if you want to be creative, is return to the state you were in, the mental state you were in when you were a child. That's when you were at your most creative. And I often do this in day long or 2 day long sessions. I ask people when were you at your most creative, and what's the most creative thing that you have done? And chances are, no, most of those answers not from work and the challenges, but something that people did as children, because you really had no filters when it came to your thought, right? So this was just a little attempt to get you back into that mode of thinking, right? Let's just proceed a little. So, one question you should always ask yourself is if creativity is so great, what stops me from being creative? ये सब बोल रहे, most of the most valuable companies in the world are companies which are based on singular ideas nowadays, right? And basically, it means that the creative economy is winning. So why aren't we all creative all the time? So let me just give you a picture of your everyday mind. Okay, this is how your mind is if we were to do a CAT scan. And I want you to concentrate on the auto part rather than the rickshaw part. Your mind is always on autopilot. You don't even realize it. And this is even more so for people who are in advertising and brand building because they're seeing things through the filter of a brand image, a brand personality, a brand character, a brand position, all of that. You are just on autopilot most of the time. And it's important to recognize that, because I am not knocking this autopilot at all. It helps us get through most of our tasks in life. Our ability to think sequentially helps us through most of our tasks in life. It's the very reason why we became the dominant species, right? But today we are not facing threats from tigers and lions. Today we are facing different kinds of threats, and where this thinking might not be good enough to solve those problems. You need to acknowledge that you work on autopilot most often, and then we can go about trying to find the solution around that. Right? Let me just show you a clip which illustrates this. I don't know how well the clip will play for all of you. It's about 2 minutes. So let me set up the situation so you understand where I'm coming from. This is from the movie A Beautiful Mind. And it's the story of this Nobel Prize winning mathematician called John Nash. At this point in time, he's in a class, and there is a conflict between him and the class. So the class, this is in the 1950s, so there are no ACs in classes. So the class wants the windows of the room open because it's a hot summer's day. But Nash, being the teacher, wants them closed because there is some work happening outside which is distracting him. So it's looking like a solution A or a solution B. So one of the persons will end up being disappointed until it gets solved by somebody who provides a solution C, and both get what they want. Look at it. It's a fascinating clip.
Can we leave one open, Professor?
To hear my own voice. Personally, I think this class will be a waste of your, and what is infinitely worse, my time. However, here we are, so you may attend or not. You may complete your assignments at your whim. We have begun. Miss.
Excuse me! Excuse me!
Hey!
Hi. We have a little problem. It's extremely hot in here with the windows closed and extremely noisy with them open. So I was wondering if there's any way you could, I don't know, maybe work someplace else for about 45 minutes?
Not a problem.
Thank you so much.
Got a break? Clean it up a little bit.
As you will find in multivariable calculus, there is often a number of solutions for any given problem.
So that's such an interesting, because it's not, what does she do? It's a great metaphor, this clip. Many times our mind is like that closed room. It's only when we open the windows of our perception and engage the outside world that we come back with a better solution. In fact, NASA, there is a beautiful slogan outside one of NASA's offices which captures this beautifully, which is, we explore other worlds to improve our own. We explore other worlds to improve our own. Right? What they showed you is that none of the other students think, not even the professor who is at a different knowledge level, thinks of there could be another solution. They are both sort of restrained or restricted by their experience of situations. It's only somebody who is more imaginative and who's willing to put in that extra effort and engage what is outside, get off a seat, engage the outside world, that you get a really interesting solution in which both of the people get what they want, right? So our mind often is on autopilot. It has the tendency to take linear steps. And as I just showed you, it has this tendency to stay in the box. That's why a lot of times you find this term creative thinking is out of the box thinking. What does that box mean? The box is the collection of the perceptions, the culture, the knowledge, the experience, and all of that bring to the table. All of us bring boxes. When you have to be creative, you have to break out of that and look outside, right? So given the paucity of time, and this is really a short time to really inspire people in a detailed manner about what creative thinking is all about, let me try and give you a shortcut, a cheat code, as they say in today's day and time. Okay, how can you be more creative? And I'll give you the code, and the code is little technical issues, so just bear with me. Sorry. The code is the word the code is the word ideas. It's an easy to remember code. Ideas. IDEAS. And each letter here stands for a certain approach when it comes to creative thinking. Now, it's very difficult to embrace all of this in one go or in one day or in half an hour, right? But what I'd like you to do is open your mind, at least in terms of implementing one of these pillars going starting today. At least
Vinay, I think you are frozen over there. I can't hear anything.
why is it such a powerful tool? You'll find that behind every great innovation, at some point in time, somebody asked a decisive question. So Edwin Land, in the 1950s, he's gone on a picnic with his son. And he takes a picture of his son. And then his son throws a tantrum. Why can't I see my picture now? I want to see it now. And that leads to the invention of the Polaroid camera. That single question of wanting to see his picture then and there led to the invention of the Polaroid camera. We can come to Akio Morita, the legendary CEO of Sony. And he likes running and he likes listening to music. And he asks his team one day, why can't I listen to music when I am running? And that single question sets the path for one of the most iconic products of the last century, the Sony Walkman, right? Closer home, I think one thing which really interests me is Eureka Forbes, because in many ways it was ahead of its time. It asked the question, why does the consumer need to go to the market to buy? Why can't we go to the consumer's home? And what is interesting is that approach, that strategic decision opened up a whole different way of creating a relationship with a household, where the Eureka Forbes salesman was not just a salesman. In ideal circumstances, he was positioned as the family's friend for life. It's a relationship that you are building. It's not a company which is selling products. At its finest, it's a company which is selling relationships. And when you sell relationships, you can sell any product, right? So it's a very good leap that an Indian company took, which I particularly like to talk about. So what is I? Just to recap what I is. I means interrogate or inquire, ask questions. Okay. And the first, in each of these pillars, I will underline one thing, which is the decisive behavior I want you to embrace. The first behavior you must, and the most important, forget everything else. If you do this better, you'll be a much better thinker. Stop jumping to answers. We have this habit of jumping to answers without understanding what the problem is, without really listening to the person who's coming up with the problem. We have this, there is this funny phrase, we exercise our mind by jumping to conclusions, and that's very true. Because what we are trying to do is we are just solution giving machines without giving the whole process of why that person has that problem, what are the elements of the problem, any great thought. So if you do this, stop jumping to answers. Just withhold your urge to jump to an answer. You'll be a better thinker. Ask many more questions. Questions not only help you understand the problem better, right? The more questions you ask, you'll be able to really figure out dukti nerves kahan hai. What is the crux of the problem, right? They also open up possibilities. In a dialogue that you have with somebody, when you are asking questions, it also helps the other person think along different lines, because maybe because he or she being stressed has not really had the opportunity to question what is causing him or what is causing her so much grief, or what is such a big challenge, and why is it so difficult to overcome, right? So that is I, the first pillar. The second pillar is D, from ideas D. D is a dive into the depths of the problem, which means what? Many times the people really try to solve a problem without really understanding it in totality. And this is in some ways a corollary of the I. It's a beautiful quote by Lewis Carroll, who says, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there, right? So it's a beautiful case where the space race is going on, which is between the USA and the USSR in the 1950s and 60s. At a particular point in time, the USSR is ahead in the space race. They have set up the first satellite, Sputnik. They have sent the first man in space, the first woman in space, the first dog in space. Kennedy knows that America has to win the space race, right? But he also knows he needs public support to fund this massive project, right? But the interesting thing is, the public does not care about the space race. They have no idea what it means, right? They have no idea कि वो एटमॉस्फेयर तोड़ने के बाद बाहर क्या रहेगा, क्या भगवान उधर रॉकेट पकड़ने के लिए खड़े हैं? However, he knows that any person who has walked on the earth has looked up in the sky and wondered about the moon, right? There's a man on the moon. The moon is associated with romance. The moon is an inspiring destination. So he gives the problem a destination. And that's the fulcrum of his thought. He tells the public, let us take a man to the moon and bring him back safely before the end of this decade. This is a beautiful articulation of a problem statement. Let us, and each part of it is necessary. Let us we will put a man to the moon and bring him back. Both of those. So moon is the inspiring destination, and bring him back safely is also an inspiring engineering benchmark, because all trips to the moon at that point in time used to end in death and disaster. And interestingly, he puts a challenging benchmark in terms of timeline. Before the end of this decade, right? Because you can pretty much, he could have said before the end of this century, and nobody would have really known the difference. But he put a very stiff deadline, because when there is a stiff deadline, people are energized. It gives anything a sense of purpose. So it's a beautiful example of looking at a complex problem and defining it so well that it makes for creative thought, right? Another, which is from a byproduct of that same era, is from the Olympics. And this is all down to the way the founder of the modern Olympics, Baron Pierre de Coubertin, defined the Olympic Games. Now, the Olympics could have just been all about who wins, who loses. But Pierre de Coubertin studied the Greek Olympics, which were in the past, and he knew that they could be about so much more. So the way he reintroduced the modern Olympics is, What if the Olympics were about a celebration of brotherhood and humanity? And that is why you have these 5 circles, which are the 5 continents, and that is why they interlock, because it is to show stronger bonding between people. So let me just play you a small brief commercial of how this thinking is really manifested. This is a beautiful clip. Look at the words of it. It's really inspiring. The footage, it might crack up a bit while you're seeing it, but it's actual live footage from the game. So it's quite revealing. Just take a look at this.
You are my adversary, but you are not my enemy. But your resistance gives me strength. Your will gives me courage. Your spirit ennobles me. And though I aim to defeat you, should I succeed, I will not humiliate you. Instead, I will honor you. For without you, I am a lesser man.
Itself. You are my adversary. You are not my enemy. And if I aim to defeat you, though I aim to defeat you, if I succeed, I will not humiliate you. Instead, I will honor you. Because without you, I am a lesser man. That's truly magnificent. It truly gives the Olympics a stage like no sporting event has, perhaps, in the world. Okay. So D is defining the problem that you have in a more inspiring, in a less mystical manner. Okay. So use the questioning that you have done in the previous stage as inputs. I have underlined this because it's a fantastic way to define problems better. Write down what the problem/challenge is, and don't write it in one way. Write it in 2 or 3 different ways. A great case in point is there's this elevator problem at a skyscraper, right? And committees set up. How do we make? A lot of complaints are coming from the lobby that the elevators are very slow. And what do we do to solve the problem? Most people suggest let's change the elevators, but that's $1 million. Somebody comes up with a solution which costs next to nothing. He just says, install mirrors in the lobby. And how does he do it? Because he keeps rewriting the problem statement. Is the problem that the elevators are fast or slow? Or is the problem the fact that people don't know what to do with their time when they are waiting, right? And that leads him to, why don't we install mirrors? Because people can spend a lot of time. Time is relative, right? You don't know how much time you're spending in front of a mirror. Immediately the complaints come down to zero, right? So I have found this step extremely useful in creative thinking. Physically write down what the problem is. Don't just write it down one way, write it down 2 or 3 different ways. Keep reframing and revisiting what you have written and try and make it inspiring. Always people think more in terms of a problem, but behind every problem, there is an opportunity. So if you try and force yourself to write, however bleak the situation, what is the opportunity that this problem seems to be hiding, right? Is there an opportunity to make things better, right? That's what you might get into. So that is ID. The third is E, which is all about exploring human emotion or connection. E is all about emotional connection. Emotional connection, which means I need to know who I'm talking to very well. Whatever your problem, there is always somebody at the end of your solution. So you're creating a cafe, a coffee cafe. There is somebody you look at as a customer. You're trying to pitch a raise to your boss. So your boss is the target of your approach, right? You're trying to woo a new client, or you're trying to stop a worker strike. There are always people who are the recipient of your creative thinking. Your creative thought does better when you put yourself in their shoes. When you put yourself in their shoes. 2 cases. First is, nowadays all brushes have these soft squeeze handles. It came from something IDEO did many years back, where they noticed children's brushes and how children used to catch brushes. So while adults used to use two fingers, children used to clutch brushes. So they thought of making soft squeeze handles so as to not hurt children's hands. And that innovation has persisted and gone across the board, right? The other, and for those of you who love cricket, the invention of the slower ball is credited to Steve Waugh. And interestingly, Steve Waugh is a batsman, was a famous great, one of the all-time great batsmen. So how did he end up with the invention? He also was a good part-time bowler, to be honest, but he wasn't a mainline bowler. How did somebody like him come up with this innovation rather than a legendary bowler? Now, because he was primarily a batsman, he could always figure out what batsmen least liked to face, especially during slog overs. And he figured his prognosis was they don't like a change in pace. So if there's a fast bowler bowling, they want the ball to come faster and faster. Suddenly, when a slower ball is bowled, it disrupts their thinking and their stroke completely. So it's a great example of looking at the problem through somebody else's side, or putting yourself on the side of the customer, putting yourself on the side of the recipient of your creative thought, right? So E is emotionally engage or connect with the audience, which is first step. Know that there is always an audience. Sometimes we make this mistake of thinking there is no audience. For anything that you do in life, there is always an audience. There is always an audience, right? So now that you know who the audience is, understand that person. In what way is your solution making their life better? I love to say this, there is only one media channel everybody is tuned into in life, which is WIIFM. What's in it for me, right? In what way are you making their lives better? Empathize. Why are they feeling this to be a problem? You should yourself feel the toughness or the difficulty of their situation. And keep asking yourself, how does your idea show them in a better light? How will your idea help your client appear better within his organization or her organization? Always begin thinking like that, right? The fourth is A, which is all about additions, accumulations. A is also a plus size, so triple A. We have this attitude in our thought process, thanks to our schooling system perhaps, which is that there is only one right answer. But in most of the work that we do, there are more than one right answers. And it's very important we keep adding to the answers, which is why I told you, even when you're doing your introduction exercise, one answer is easy, 2 or 3 is what you should try to keep gunning for. Keep yourself going for one more answer. Push yourself to go that little bit further, because that's what's going to make you more creative. The great Linus Pauling, one of the few people in the world who has 2 Nobel Prizes in 2 different disciplines, had said, the best way to get a great idea is to get a lot of good ideas. Quantity matters. Quantity ensures quality, right? So what are the mindsets I want you to take? There is no one right answer. Don't stop after finding the first solution. And you would have noticed this for yourself in the exercise that I gave you. The moment you found one answer, you kind of relax. But interestingly, and I do brainstorming consultation, I facilitate brainstorms. This is an insight I have. After you find one answer is usually when you find, quickly after that is when you find a better answer and an even better answer, because the bridge has been made. The bridge to the solution of the problem has been made. So don't just stop at one. It's criminal. Don't stop at one. Push yourself to go for 3, 4 more, right? Gun for more. Quality will be ensured by the quantity you generate. Generate more answers, even if 90% of them might be nonsensical. Get into the habit of generating more, because out of the 90% which are nonsensical, 4 or 5 might be utterly world class, right? So like you saw in this clip that I showed you, there was the professor's solution on one side, there was the student's solution on one side. The lady, the heroine of the clip, she found something which brought both of those together. So you'll always have one solution which you have. Say it caters to a certain aspect of the problem. Force yourself to think of another which caters to maybe a polar opposite of that problem, and try to find the middle ground. Always try and find the sweet spot. Lastly, S. S is all about making head of a tail, which is all about storytelling, right? What does that mean? I love this quote from Einstein. No great discovery was made in science except by one who lifted his head above the details and ventured into a more comprehensive vision. It's interesting, the most famous scientist of all time is actually telling you it's all about what story are the numbers telling you. What story is underlying this situation? The more you begin to think like that, the richer your thinking becomes. This clip is a little long, so I won't play, but I'll give you some examples, and this really does well in the branded world. Okay. Now, Asian Paints has never been about paints. They have taken the platform that your house tells a story about you. Okay, it's a collection of stories, right? It helps your house make a statement. It's not about the color. It's not about how long that lasts. It's all about the stories which are created, which is why they say, "Har ghar kuch kehta hai," right? Cadbury's Dairy Milk is all about empowering sweet moments. Kuch meetha ho jaye, right? It's not about the product as such. It's about the ability of the product to create a larger narrative, which helps the customer feel a certain way. That's the larger story. Surf Excel, probably the most interesting example of storytelling in our country. Before Surf Excel came, it was all about who washes whitest. You used to have these visuals of muscular hands, ragad rahe the cloth ko, bucket mein. But with Surf Excel, they tapped into the insight that mothers are concerned about how their children are being brought up. Are they learning the right values? So Surf Excel decided to partner mothers in the upbringing of their children. So Surf Excel took a larger story. We enable your children to learn good things by participating in the world, not worried about how dirty their clothes get. So there is always a larger story in whatever you're doing. Yeah? Yeah. So the last, nothing exists in isolation. Whatever your product is, connect the dots around it. What is the larger story that your product or that situation is telling you about? Okay. Take the bigger picture into account and discover the larger story. Whatever you do, there is always a larger story at work. So to sum up, I think it's very important that you acknowledge it for yourself that we need to think differently going forward. We don't think creatively normally. We are always in that autopilot mode. It's important you recognize that then, because then you'll be able to think more creatively. Use this code, and I don't expect you to get better at all of these letters in one go. Even pick one. Pick one and try that. It will help your thinking tremendously. And I hope you all unleash your inner spark. To conclude, let me just come to the battleground of the Mahabharata, where Lord Krishna has just finished his rendition of the Bhagavad Gita, the most epic story ever told. And what is interesting is he doesn't tell Arjuna that this is the truth. You have to accept it. He says something beautiful. He says, Yatha ichhasi tatha kuru. Yatha ichhasi tatha kuru. Which means, I have said what I have to say. Whether you follow it or not is up to you. I have said what I have to say. Whether you follow it or not is up to you. Thank you for the privilege of your attention for all these minutes. I hope in some way I have been able to spark your thinking along a different direction. I hope you find humor and storytelling in all your thinking. Thank you so much.
That was very nice, Vinay. If you can stop sharing, then we'll open the session for question and answers.
I'm doing it.
Yeah. So I think it's a very interesting take on how to be more creative. The one thing which I have learned is that why do my clients always ask for options? Possibly because they've heard you telling them that quality will come only from quantity. I think this is a great learning for all of us. And now it is open to everybody for questions.
Put it in the chat window. Any question? Thank you, Sahil. Thank you, Vijayanand. Thank you, Bharat Hindu. Please do click on my YouTube channel and look at some of the films I've done there. You might find them interesting. Yes, somebody is asking one question. Pankaj was asking. Parvez.
Please go ahead, Parvez.
You're on mute.
You can unmute yourself before asking a question so that it's easier for... Parvez, we can't hear you. Parvez, you can type out the question in the chat because we can't hear you.
Thank you, Parvez. Write your question in the chat.
Vinay, I have a...
Yeah, please.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Based on your experience, do you find that there's an optimal age at which people are more creative or less creative? Of course, children you mentioned, but what about once you start working?
So, I think there is a phase in which you, as a child, you are definitely more creative. But I think as you grow older, it's a choice. It's a choice that we make of being more creative or not. What I find is people who get into the business side of things kind of shut the door to creativity, which is unfortunate because some of the most creative people I have met come from the business side of things, but they are the exception, not the rule. Okay? And they think, ye mere bas ki baat nahi hai, which is very unfair, I think. And it's a waste. I think as you grow older and you have more wisdom, you have more things to reference and you should automatically become more creative. It's a question of having the self-confidence. So to me, creative is also about being confident about your own ability. A lot of people are creative, but a lot of people don't have the confidence in your own ability to stand up in front of a crowd and say, I have an idea, right? So I think that needs to be consciously developed.
As a matter of fact, I read somewhere recently that as you age, and especially people above 60, turn to be more creative because they feel that there's nothing to lose now.
Sorry?
What I read recently in an article that many people above 60 become more creative because they find that now there is nothing to lose. I can say whatever I want.
Absolutely. And that is the fundamental attitude when it comes to creativity. When you conduct yourself like you have nothing to lose, it's always when you're more creative, because the biggest critic of your own creative idea is yourself. We self-censor tremendously. We knock down our own thoughts thinking, yaar, log mere bare mein kya sochenge agar main ye zor se bolu, right? Beyond a certain age, you feel, forget it, jo soche. So you will find that happening, but it's important to prepone that not giving a damn or a hoot about the world into your behavior, or at least embrace it for an hour. It's called the momentary suspension of judgment. Like we used to have the momentary suspension of disbelief in Hindi movies. Amitabh Bachchan goes out of his room and he just puts a pencil mustache, comes back and his mother doesn't recognize him. Right? But we swallow it. Like that, we need the momentary suspension of judgment. Yes, there are two questions, I think, which are come.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lakshmikant. How have ideas, how has the idea changed from print to digital age? So, who has asked this?
Nitin.
Nitin. So that's an interesting question, Nitin. Thanks for that. To me, I think a lot of people say digital like it's a new world. Okay, to some extent it is, but when it comes to branding, largely it is just a new medium. It is just a new way of engaging the customer. To me, the fundamentals of an idea stay the same. For instance, if I were to take Surf Excel, and Surf Excel was all about empowering the mother to to bring up her children better, learning the right values. When it comes to the digital age, I will keep this idea at the core of any thought that I do, but I will express it differently. I might have interactive sessions where mothers and children learn interesting things together. So digital as a medium gives you more opportunities to engage at a personal level with your customer. But when it comes to the fundamentals of an idea, I think that stays the same across media. Yeah, what is the other question
from Parvez?
Yeah, please. What is that? How does a small company compete with companies that have a moat? What is moat?
More, Vijay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, a moat is like, what Warren Buffett, etc. talk about, where a company is a monopoly and they've got brand value, they've got customer, where stickiness of a customer is there, they've got pricing power, etc. So a small company, trying to enter the market, like Asian Paints, like for example, Mr. Vinay, I'll give you my own example. I have a construction, a chemical company. We do waterproofing, and now people like Asian Paints and Pidilite, Dr. Fixit, etc., have come into the market. They've got huge exposure because of brand and advertising, etc. They have, because they're in the industry for so long, they've got a huge pricing power because of getting raw materials at a cheaper rate, etc. And a small company, medium company, it finds it very difficult to penetrate that market. So my question is, how does a company like that survive or compete with something like those companies?
So it's a very interesting question. Thanks for that, Parvez. It's all about, there are giants and there are small fish.
Yeah.
Okay? And the giants set the tonality. They are dominating the marketplace. The interesting thing, especially in this era, is that every small fish also has a mic in their hand, right? They can also tell a story about themselves. And it's very important they find, and what I mean by story is, I don't mean things like advertising or any such thing. I mean things like, what does this company stand for and what does it do better than the giants do, right? In any giant, there is always an Achilles heel. So if you study that and see what is it that they cannot really talk on, and begin talking on that, and begin to improve your product offering on that, that's where you find the slot. And honestly, this is a much longer discussion. I can't really answer it in 2 minutes, but I'll just give you an example. When Apple, people forget that Apple actually entered as a very small niche garage brand. And at that time, it was up against a giant IBM, right? IBM was ruling the market. People who have programmed companies in that era knew IBM was synonymous with computers. But Apple saw there was an opportunity in creating a storyline around where IBM was making everybody the same. It was taking the humanity out of computing, so to speak. Apple stood for that individuality, which is why even to this date, they have the I suffix in all their products. iPod, iPhone, iMac, all of that, iTunes, okay? And they said, this is a slot that we begin to talk about. So whereas these people make products which are very gray, we will make more colorful products. we will make products which have graphical user interface. So where IBM was talking to the engineers who knew programming, Apple was making it simpler for other people to embrace computers. Now, what is interesting is today you might say that looks like Apple was looking after the bigger market. No, at that time, even the CEO of Dell has said there is a market for about 4 to 5 PCs in the entire world. Right. Nobody was seeing this as becoming a global phenomenon, as something everybody would embrace. So why does that come? Because you figured out that little Achilles heel in a giant's offering. Any giant has that little slot where you can target. But that takes a lot of analysis, that takes a lot of understanding what a particular category is about.
Yeah, got it. Great.
I would recommend this book called Eating the Big Fish.
Okay, I'll write it
Eating
down.
the Big Fish. Read it. It's an extremely inspiring book in this genre about the topic we are talking about. Yes. Any other questions?
Vinay, I
Please,
think probably your last blog on the halftime talks for the football could answer his questions, because I think that's where the small teams are now beating the giants are the answers to his questions possibly.
Yeah. Do follow me on LinkedIn also.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
Yeah, so that's a phenomena where the world is now realized that smaller teams also can beat the bigger teams, and there is hope. So it's an interesting article. You can read it.
Very true.
Great. So I think if there are no further questions, are there any questions?
Yeah, I put it in the chat. Can you
Okay,
check up the chat?
Yeah. First generation entrepreneur by the time he stabilizes and learns tricks of the trade, age and family responsibilities catch up and unable to take business to the next level. What's the solution forward?
So one solution forward is, I think, if you're an entrepreneur, and even if you're a singular entrepreneur, it's always important to have a next level. Somebody who you can pass on the torch to as well. You need to groom somebody. See, when you're creating an organization, I think it's important to have a long-term view. Right? Today it's a small setup, but tomorrow it's going to be an organization. You have to have the long-term view on things. So I think somebody can be groomed to take on or build from the strong foundation that you have laid. And the second thing is, individually, I think age itself is, I think it's a number in today's day and time. It's about how long you can see. If you have traveled that far and you are making headway, it's about being inspired enough to take it further. So
But you get
again,
fatigued.
I think, yeah.
But you get fatigued. You get fatigued at the end of the day.
Yeah, of course. So which is why you need to develop people below you who can carry the baton.
The children are no more interested. The children are no more interested in taking care of their father's business. They are looking at foreign opportunities and IT companies, short-term IT way of doing things. The information. Yeah.
So two things. One is, I think that will be a longer discussion because it depends on what your business is. But the second is also, I would again reiterate that these second in line need not necessarily be your children. They could be people you develop and you have a mentor-like relationship with to take things forward. I think even that is possible. See, I think if you have a basic brand which is doing well and you have brought it to a certain level, think of it as, how do I take this brand to the next level? How do I take this business to the next level? And if I had no constraints, what would I do? So when you apply the no constraints kind of thinking to that, I'm sure eventually you will come down to, okay, I have these constraints. But at least attempt thinking along the lines of, if I had no constraints, what would I do? And out of those maybe 10 ideas, you might find one idea, which even within the constraint, you can probably begin work on. But I think that's, again, the subject of a more personal and a larger discussion.
So, thank you.
Sunil, I think probably if you don't have a children, what we will do possibly could answer your question.
Exit.
Yeah.
Exit.
Yeah, exactly. Also, but I'm sure you want to see it grow further. So again, that's a very personal thing.
Great. So that's it. And may I now request my colleague Alpana Sharma to please deliver the vote of thanks for this very interesting session from Vinay.
So as we have come to the end of a very, very interesting session, on behalf of Tempest Advertising, would like to thank Mr. Vinay for sharing with us the idea, the code to succeed, for taking out his time especially, and the code to succeed, as we have said. And we truly understood the idea to be innovative, to be creative, to be imaginative, to find the solutions around the problems. And I must say this session has really opened our minds. I would also like to thank all the participants for attending the session. We look forward to have you all in our next session. Also, for more updates and details regarding the next Open Mind session, I would you can follow Tempest Advertising on Instagram and visit our site. Lastly, would want to thank all of you for the participation. Thank you.